As he knelt on his neck, he stared into a camera with a look that haunts me to this day. Those 9 minutes and 29 seconds took George Floyd's life and changed America's national conversation about law enforcement. Those 9 minutes and 29 seconds sparked a global movement and compelled us to bear witness to the reality of racial injustice in our country. In this Senate, we are in a privileged position to face that reality and to continue America's long, sometimes bitter march toward equal justice under the law. That is why I rise today in support of Kristen Clarke's nomination to be Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. It's worth noting the history of this position. The Civil Rights Division is one of the most important components of the Justice Department. The Attorney General's office has existed since 1789. The Justice Department itself was not created until after our Civil War. During the days of Reconstruction after that war, our nation resolved to take new steps to make a more perfect union through the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, the 14th Amendment's guarantee of due process and equal protection, and the 15th Amendment's protection of all citizens' fundamental right to vote. The Department of Justice was created after the passage of those amendments and entrusted with the responsibility to defend the rights of Americans, particularly the newly emancipated, formerly enslaved Americans. Given the department's immediate imperative to protect and preserve civil rights, President Ulysses S. Grant appointed Amos Ackerman to be the first Attorney General to lead this new department. Why? He had extensive experience in prosecuting voter intimidation as the U.S. Attorney in the state of Georgia. More than 150 years later, the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department now is entrusted with that constitutional responsibility. The division enforces federal statutes prohibiting discrimination based on race, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, religion, national origin, and citizenship status. And just as President Grant appointed a legal expert with the breadth of experience to lead the newly formed Justice Department in 1870, today, President Joe Biden has chosen Kristen Clarke to take up the mantle as the head of the Civil Rights Division. With her breadth of experience defending the civil rights of all Americans, Kristen Clarke is singularly qualified to lead this division, particularly at this moment in history. And Madam President, Kristen Clarke will be the first Senate-confirmed woman of color to do so, the first. When I listen to the caricatures that are portrayed on the floor of the Senate about this woman, I find it hard to believe they're talking about the Kristen Clarke that we met in open Senate hearings. We know what happened to the Civil Rights Division under President Trump. Under President Trump and Attorney General Sessions and Barr, the Civil Rights Division was devastated. Over the past 4 years, the division rescinded guidance protecting transgender students, prohibited the use of consent decrees with local police departments that engaged in systemic misconduct, and abandoned its prior legal position supporting Americans' fundamental right to vote. I believe America needs a Civil Rights Division that vigorously defends the civil rights of all Americans. Kristen Clarke is the legal expert we need to restore and reinvigorate the Civil Rights Division. Notably, you wouldn't know it from the characterizations on the other side about her experience. Notably, she has been a veteran of 2 of the sections. She began her legal career defending voting rights in the voting section and later prosecuted hate crimes in the division's criminal section. She personally understands the key role the division's line attorneys play in protecting civil rights. Since leaving the Civil Rights Division, Ms. Clarke has continued defending civil rights in state government and national civil rights organization. First, Ms. Clarke led co-led the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund's voting rights work, litigating voting rights cases under the Voting Rights Act and the National Voter Registration Act. Then she served as a civil rights official for the New York State Attorney General's office, where she played a key role in launching religious rights initiatives to address faith-based discrimination. When you listen to those assignments and the fact that this woman was chosen to head these divisions, how can it possibly square with some of the caricatures that have been drawn on the floor today about who she is? Most recently, Ms. Clarke was chosen to lead the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law. Those of us who follow this closely know it is one of the most preeminent civil rights groups in America. During her tenure, the Lawyers Committee has taken on a huge caseload and doubled in size to address the most pressing civil rights issues of our time, including hate crimes. Now, here's the part that I want to make special emphasis on. Both Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clarke have extensive endorsements from law enforcement organizations. And yet, when they were characterized on the floor of the Senate by their critics, they were characterized as haters of police and law enforcement. It just mystifies me how senators can come to the floor knowing these organizations and believe that these two women have hoodwinked them into believing that they supported law enforcement. The women and men in law enforcement aren't pushed around and aren't easily deceived. They have endorsed these two women, and today we address Kristen Clarke's nomination because of the records they have written, not over a period of days or weeks or months, but years, and in some cases, decades that they had written. Consider this statement from Sheriff David Mahoney from Dane County, Wisconsin, recently stepped down as the National Sheriff's Association. And let me quickly add, National Sheriff's Association is a powerful organization, and it's one that isn't pushed around by any politicians. Sheriff Mahoney wrote, and I want to quote his words after some of the outrageous charges that have been made against Ms. Clarke this afternoon. Sheriff Mahoney wrote, "Building trust between law enforcement and communities is essential for law enforcement to effectively serve all members of our community. It is with this in mind that I strongly support Kristen Clarke. Ms. Clarke has built trust at every stage of her career." Does that sound like someone who wants to defund the police? Do you think that this Sheriff Mahoney from Dane County in Wisconsin would say that about someone who wants to defund police? He went on to say, when she was a federal prosecutor as a young attorney, she gained the trust of federal agents, domestic violence survivors, crime victims. When she was chief of the Civil Rights Bureau in New York State, Attorney General's office, she built trust among New Yorkers to protect their rights and the Lawyers Committee. Ms. Clarke gained the trust of hate crimes victims and survivors. She has so many endorsements from law enforcement groups, from prosecutors. I'm not going to read them all into the record, but I ask consent to be able to enter letters of support for Ms. Clarke into the record at this point.
Without objection.
The point I'm trying to make is this. At this moment in history, filling this division, the Civil Rights Division, on the anniversary of George Floyd's murder on the streets of Minneapolis, we are choosing the first woman of color in the history of the United States to head this division. It is an historic choice. It shouldn't be trivialized by those who want to paint a caricature of this woman that is not even close to the truth. It shouldn't be trivialized by ignoring the many endorsements she rightfully received because of her good life's work. Having spent her entire career defending the civil rights of all Americans, Ms. Clarke is the person for the job. President Joseph Biden believes that. The Attorney General believes it. I believe it as well. At a time when we've seen an appalling rise in hate crimes, we need someone with her experience to head this division. I urge my colleagues to take note of the continued need for the Civil Rights Division to do its important work 150 years after its creation. Given that need and Ms. Clarke's breadth and depth of experience, I urge all of my colleagues to vote in favor of her nomination. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, all post-cloture time has expired. The question is on the nomination. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn,